Hello one and all, this is Soulful Lordy, James Bullock, with the 2021 Top 5 Soulful Moments in Video Games. As you know from years past, this list provides 5 grandiose moments from 5 different video games in 2021 that were released in 2021 that made my soul jump, my heart quiver, and me just being able to say thank you for all the great games we've been able to get in this year. A year that many believe will be a very slow year for games, but by the end was one of the best we've seen in quite some time. Now, of course, with this list, there will be spoilers for games including Resident Evil Village, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, Psychonauts 2, Lost Judgment, and Far Cry 6. So we'll first start off with Resident Evil Village, the sequel to Resident Evil 7 that was the first ever Resident Evil game presented in first-person view. Resident Evil 7 really set a high standard for the sequel that, to me, was met and at times surpassed. And even though Lady Dimitrescu was the big marketing tool when it came to Resident Evil Village's promotional tools, she was only a very small part of the game. In actuality, the game was broken up into sub-bosses, and Lady D was the first sub-boss you had to face. But the second sub-boss was the one that really stood out to me and really just upped the level of creepiness that came to Resident Evil Village. By entering a house occupied by Lady Beneviento, you are stripped of all your items, all your weapons, but you don't really need them because the whole basis of this house is solving the puzzle that will allow Ethan to get out of it before he is trampled by easily one of the most startling things about the entire game that is Resident Evil Village, and that is this grotesque crying baby. And I don't mean a baby-sized baby, I mean a gigantic baby that occupies an entire hallway when it finds out that Ethan is nearby, and it will chase Ethan until you get to a particular point where you are able to get away. It is easily the most harrowing experience of the entire game when you first play it. Now, of course, when it comes to Resident Evil games, replaying the games for trophies and achievements and unlockables is the name of the game, so it becomes less harrowing and less traumatizing to a certain extent as you play the game multiple times because you know exactly what to do. But that first time when you hear the baby, when you see it bust through the door and you don't know where to go other than hiding under a bed, it definitely sets a high benchmark of what is to come. And unfortunately for me, it never reached those same heights in Resident Evil Village in terms of genuine shock factor and fear, but it still was a really good game. Speaking of really good games, really good sequels, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. The PlayStation 5 exclusive game features Ratchet and Clank not only rifting apart because of this interdimensional rift, but also rifts them apart literally because Ratchet is in one part and Clank is in another part. And this allows for the introduction of 2 new characters. For Clank, he teams up with Rivet, a female Lombax very similar to Ratchet. On the opposite end of the spectrum is Ratchet, who gets really unwillingly teamed up with Kit, a robot that is very similar to Clank in appearance, but in personality and attitude, worldly different. And Kit is brought to life with the wonderful voice acting of Deborah Wilson, who encapsulates the trauma that is connected to this character. I won't spoil the big twist and the big reveal as to why Kit matters to some of these characters, specifically Rivet, but I will say this. There's a very emotional scene when you first really interact with Kit, and you find out that Kit isn't just living in a library because he wants to just read a whole bunch of books or even protect the sanctuary that is the library. Really, Kit is somebody that has been utilized for the benefits of others against his will. In a lot of ways, Kit is not really a good person in his mind, and Ratchet has to go about teaching Kit that we all make mistakes, we all get used at times, and it's up to us to try to be the best people we can be, and a lot of times that works alongside other people. Ratchet and Clank, even though the series has always had that kid-friendly, childlike nature, Rift Apart is one of the more mature examples of what this series can provide, and Kit is one of the main reasons for that maturity. Speaking of long-awaited sequels that has a childlike aesthetic with very mature themes and personalities, Psychonauts 2. The first Psychonauts was originally released in 2005, and it would take a Kickstarter and the help of Microsoft to finally get the sequel. And thankfully, the wait was well worth it. Picking up right where the first Psychonauts ended, we're taking control once again of Raz as he becomes a part of the mysterious yet widely known Psychonauts, and it's through this research and understanding of what people can do with their psychic powers that pretty much opens the gateway to the sequel's plot. Raz has to go on a journey to reunite the Psychic Six, a group of individuals that were able to take down the fearsome Maligula way before the events of Psychonauts. And upon doing so, Raz is confronted by the real mental issues, hang-ups, and traumas of the Psychic Six. And this provides one of the most exhilarating, entertaining, and hilarious moments in all of video games in 2021. Thrust into a mock game show, Raz must use his platforming skills to jump around, collect items and ingredients, some of these ingredients featuring actually living things like onions and watermelons. Chop them up, cook them, put them all together, and serve them to these gigantic puppets that are just famished. The crescendo of every time feeding these puppet judges their food, the response is so underwhelming but ridiculous in the same vein, because you know they enjoyed it, but they won't give you credit for it. They won't praise you for it and all the hard work that you did. Really, words don't do it justice. If you have Game Pass, if you have a PlayStation, if you have a PC, I say definitely play this game for just this section. You will enjoy the rest of the game more than likely. If you enjoyed the first few hours, you will enjoy a majority of Psychonauts 2. But this is the section, to me, that really made Psychonauts 2 stand out, and it was like, okay, I need to see what other insanity I'm getting myself into when it comes to this game. 2021 also brought us the sequel to Judgment, the Yakuza series spin-off featuring lawyer-turned-detective Takayuki Yagami. Now, in Lost Judgment, Takayuki is given the task of solving a bullying epidemic, and this opens up a high school that wasn't available in any of the previous Yakuza games. Now, this high school also opens up the school cases sub-story that allows for Takayuki to go on a journey alongside with the school's mystery research club that allows for him to try to track down the professor, a wily character who has turned a lot of students into bad apples. Now, what these school cases provide are mini-games, and the Yakuza games are known for having a plethora of mini-games, like the dancing mini-game where you utilize the controller to match the sequences that are floating from the top of the screen to the bottom in hopes of getting a great score. But this game opens up more than just that. You have brand new mini-games that I say right now, not only some of the best mini-games in the Yakuza franchise, but in all of gaming in 2021. There is a skateboard minigame that would give Tony Hawk's games a run for its money. There's a robotics club minigame that has this puzzle-centric nature to it while upgrading your robots in hopes of taking down other robots before they can take over your territory by capturing blocks and cubes that they can lay down in certain patterns. It's almost like Tetris meets a demolition derby. There's a bike race minigame that's very similar to Road Rash from the old 16-bit era, where you have to bump into your adversaries while blocking and avoiding objects and attacks in hopes of reaching the boss at the end and trying to outrace that boss, who usually has a faster bike than you do. So you have to be mindful of your speed, your health, and your boost, because if you don't time it properly, you will not reach the finish line in time and have to do it all over again. And then there's my favorite mini game, and quite possibly any Yakuza game, the boxing mini game. A full 3D, functional, customizable, movable, arcade-style boxer. I had so much fun playing the mini games and learning the mini games and exploring. I spent probably a third of my time, if not more than that, just playing the mini games because it was so much fun, and a viable reason as to why you should play this too if you enjoy a plethora of different things to do. Last but not least is Far Cry 6. While it won't go down as one of the best games of the year for me personally, and it won't even go down as one of the best Far Cry games I've played, it still was a solid experience nonetheless. Now, the reason that this is actually on this list over certain other games is because of one thing that it did that it really didn't do a majority of the game. The Far Cry series has gotten a little bit more absurd as the years progressed, as the sequels were released, but this one was more rooted in realism and the hard truth and reality of dictatorship, and a majority of the characters really didn't feel that happy for obvious reasons. There weren't the herks or the real grandiose comedic moments associated with the majority of the story. It was pretty much, here's a very grim situation and fight your way out of it, except for a trio of missions focusing on a rooster. Far Cry 6 takes from Far Cry Primal, where it focused on having allies that were just animals. And one of those allies, or amigos as they're called in Far Cry 6, is Chicharron, a psychotic, bloodthirsty rooster who wants nothing more than to topple the government that is oppressing the people of Yara. And of course, you get to help it. And in these missions, you not only attack other animals that have been mutated and are ravenous, but also burn down and destroy legal documents and crash a party, shooting enemies as Latin heavy metal plays in the background. It is easily one of the most ridiculous and absurd moments in Far Cry 6, and I love it for it. It does something that pretty much nothing else in the game does, and that's give a sense of levity to the overall just frenetic action and nature of the Far Cry games as we know them now. As I said, Far Cry 6 won't go down as one of my favorite games of 2021, but Chicharron will live on forever in my heart and my soul. So there you have it. This has been Soulful Lordy, James Bullock, with the 2021 Top 5 Soulful Moments in Video Games. Here's to a great, masterful, wonderful, and memorable 2022 in video games that will definitely make me say by the end of 2022, oh lordy.